David again spares Saul's life. The Ziphites went to Saul at Gibeah and said, "Is not David hiding on the hill of Hilka or Hakila, which faces Jeshimon?" Again, these are words, especially in the Old Testament, that not used to pronouncing and saying. If you do know the correct pronunciation when you read along with us, just follow along. And if you know how to type them out, I always love comments. Anytime you have comments, I do definitely read those. Let's continue. So Saul went down to the desert of Ziph with his 3,000 chosen men of Israel to search there for David. Saul made his camp beside the road on the hill of Hakilah facing Jeshimon. But David stayed in the desert. When he saw that Saul had followed him there, he sent out scouts and learned that Saul had definitely arrived. Then David set out and went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw where Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the commander of the army, had lain down. Saul was laying inside the camp and with the army encamped around him. David then asked Ahimelech, the Hittite, and Abishai, son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, "Who will go down into the camp with me to Saul?" "I'll go with you," said Abishai. So David and Abishai went to the army by night, and there was Saul lying asleep inside the camp with his spear stuck in the ground near his head. Abner and the soldiers were lying around him. Abishai said to David, "Today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of my spear. I won't strike him twice." But David said to Abishai, "Don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives," he said, "the Lord himself will strike him. Either his time will come and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now get the spear and water jug that are near his head and let's go." So, just in quick reference, remember that Saul has been jealous from previous Bible studies. Now, this is, again, we're into another Bible study. And once again, we're seeing that Saul's seeking David's life again. Saul's been jealous because Saul was anointed. He was chosen as a leader to Israel, as someone that fits the role of what people, the community, would believe a leader should look like, and not necessarily how they are, meaning their spirit. And so the Lord's giving Israel exactly what they want, as well as an example. And so Saul was anointed, and Saul did also have the Holy Spirit come on him at times when he was walking with the Lord. And then there were a lot of times where he wasn't. He was focused on himself. He was now focused and more entertained with the kingship role that he had, rather than truly being a leader of Israel. And so once again, Saul's out for David's life, and David knows it, and David understands that. And so David has went out to the camp once again. David is able to get close to Saul without Saul even knowing. And at this point, he's telling Abishai to take the water jug as well as the spear. Because last time, we talked about last time, Saul had went into a cave to relieve himself, and he didn't know that David was there with his men. And so David had snuck up, and instead of killing Saul, he cut off a piece of Saul's robe and showed it to him after Saul had left the cave, and said, "Hey, look, the Lord had delivered you into my hands. What would be presumed to be delivered, but I know that you're anointed. So I know that people, my own men, telling me, let's go ahead and kill you was not right. And so once again, he's telling Abishai, who's with them, is that they're not going to lay a hand against Saul, because it's not right for him to lay a hand against Saul, because Saul, he's recognizing the fact that Saul is the current leader of Israel. And if there is an issue and the Lord is very displeased with Saul, that Saul will Saul, something will happen to Saul. Saul will do something to himself, or go out and battle and potentially perish because of because Saul's not following what the Lord's wanting him to do. And so that's where we're currently at. We're currently with David once again with his men, and he's giving them a lesson. He's giving himself a lesson, as well as his own men a lesson that are following him. And it's already been proclaimed that they already know that even by Saul, that David would eventually take up leadership, because Saul understood that you could say hard-headed, that Saul wanted to do what he wanted to do. And so David is showing a different type of spirit when it comes to living and walking with the Lord. And so right now we're getting a lot of good things, especially with David's character, and David will show that he is human as well. So what kind of bringing past to present, being respectful, and I know, especially right now, it's one of those things that it's extremely difficult, because you can see it culturally that there's a lot of hurt still, and people want more action. And so there's a portion, there's a moment, and there's a time, and then there's a place of providing respectability for positions. And you also, though, as well, need to be able to confront situations, need to be able to talk, to communicate, to be able to protest, or be able to get into a conversation with someone of authority, to have them understand what's going on, or what a situation is, or what their community, including that their leadership of, what issues are arising. And it's not just that one person or a few people who are, it's their way or in the highway. So this is going to show that it's always, the sickle's not always needed, aka you always, something to do somebody harm is not always needed, and leaving it into the Lord's hand, being able to discuss it with that person and leaving it into the Lord's hands. What kind of thoughts or feelings come to your mind reading over this? How does it make you feel, and what does it make you think?